So, let's begin with just a short motivation to try to recall our motivation, because we've had 2 classes today. Those who are watching on DVD can do a longer meditation. You pause and elongate the meditation, because we just took a lunch break right now. To try to settle your mind again. Let go of the flashiness of your eye consciousness. And the trains of thought that have been engendered during conversations at lunch, thinking. And see if you can pay mindfulness to the respiration, to the breathing, in and out, anapanasati. And through the force of familiarization, then bring your attention to the consciousness itself, as in the 3rd close placement, similar to that. Here watching the specific characteristic of the mind, of its nature, clarity. And in so doing, letting go of everything else, all the other content, whether it be the seeming obscurity of the mind, the unclarity, even though this is not a meditation on emptiness itself, you can remind yourself, as there is no self the way that it's appearing to my mind, I can let go of that. There's no fault. There's nothing lost. I still exist conventionally. Let go of the appearance of your body. When I say let go of the appearance, that means let go of grasping to that, adhering to that, so that as you concentrate instead on the spaciousness of the mind, those appearances begin to subside. And within that clear, calm state, think all living beings are exactly the same as myself in wanting to be happy, wanting to be free of suffering. Whatever transient circumstances predispose me to look at them as attractive or friendly, or as unattractive, or as objects of anger, as enemies, or as strangers, all of those are unreliable, changeable, transient. They've all been equally friend, enemy, and stranger. And in the long run, like myself, wanting to be happy, equal to me, wanting to be free of suffering. Recognizing, in the larger scheme of things, we're all part of one large entity of sentient being, wishing the best for all living beings, ultimate peace of mind and bliss. How wonderful that would be. think I'm going to listen to, contemplate, meditate on the subject of mind and mental factors, to better understand my mind, to develop the good qualities, eliminate what has to be eliminated, develop what has to be developed, become less of a burden, actual benefit for sentient beings. First, to avoid harming them, then to collect all the virtuous prerequisites, even knowledge and so forth, and then ultimately completely tame the mind. I'm going to listen to the teachings in order to become enlightened. For that purpose, with that motivation to benefit all sentient beings, then the action of listening will become very powerful. And then bring your attention back to present. And it has been moved and seconded that there's a question by John. Maureen seconded it, and I think who else? Dorje thirded it. There's a good question. So John, what was your question?
Let's see. So, really,
I'll remind you. You don't remember
no,
your question.
It's the vision and the hearing. What's the word that?
So we were talking about concentration. We said that the object of samadhi, Sangha said the object of samadhi had to be mentally created. So your question was like, if I remember, if you were looking at a candle, and then that concentration with the eye consciousness sort of seems like that's understandable, that that's not fully qualified samadhi, but the after you were saying something about the after image when you close your eyes and then you concentrate on that, is that a suitable object? Something to that effect?
Right.
So I don't know exactly. I think sometimes it's said that what we call after image could be something. Even when you're concentrating with the mental with the eye consciousness, the mental consciousness does have a mental image of that, right? At the same moment, you're conceptualizing that, you can be holding that, but when you're concentrating on the eye concentration, remember when we talk about inattentive perception, when your mental consciousness has a certain amount of facility to pay attention to the different consciousnesses, either sequentially or at the same time. If you're really concentrating on one thing, putting your attention to one thing from your mental consciousness on, say, what's the input from the eye consciousness, you don't have the ability then to concentrate on other things, to be attentive of other things. So you're not really attentive of the mental image as much as if you're watching that. But I think there is some correlation. Like, for instance, some people, to visualize the Buddha, they have a statue of Buddha in front, and they might be looking at that and trying to keep the mental image of that, when you don't have any ability yet to generate the image of Buddha. But then eventually you have to close your eyes and try to, within your mental consciousness, have the elongation of that mental image that was along with it. It's that mental image that you're concentrating on that will be the object with which you develop single-pointed concentration, from my understanding. Okay. Done.
Oh, look at this once, but I didn't quite get it off. Developing non-conceptual mind based on unreal meditative object.
Non-conceptual. This came in concentration, right? You can have, the question was, does the object of meditative stabilization have to be real object? Definitely. The answer was no. You could have if you familiarize yourself even with something that's unreal, that can appear clearly to non-conceptual consciousness. So, also it's said that sometimes there's a discussion. I think we mentioned it briefly in Lorig and other times, but there's a discussion about whether the bodhisattva who thinks, I will lead all sentient beings to nirvana, to enlightenment first, then I will achieve enlightenment, whether that's a realistic mind or not. That's called which kind of bodhicitta? The shepherd-like bodhicitta. So, in a sense, that's in some ways one of the most powerful, because it really subjugates, denigrates the self-cherishing and puts others' welfare first. But in reality, you can't lead other sentient beings to enlightenment unless you yourself are enlightened. You don't know the path. So, even though that's the case, even though the bodhisattvas do meditate on many such kinds of things which are not factually concordant, or like visualizing all of the horizon, all the world filled with corpses and so forth, still that is not called an erroneous consciousness. Okay, so let's go a little bit further, and then we'll review this a little bit. So there's a statement in Dharmakirti's Pramanavartika. Remember, Dharmakirti had written these 7 treatises on valid cognition. In his commentary on Dignaga's text was called the Compendium of Valid Cognition, the Pramana Samuchaya, and Dharmakirti wrote a commentary on that called the Pramanavartika. And in that he says somewhere, therefore, utmost familiarization with whatever kind of thing you familiarize with, whether it be real or unreal, results in clear non-conceptual consciousness when that familiarization is thoroughly completed. So we're talking about these different kinds of feature. The functional feature of meditative stabilization, remember, and the definition on page 30 was that it acted as a support for wisdom, for knowledge. He says the functional feature of meditative stabilization is specified as acting as a support for knowledge because through the force of analysis, with the wisdom of individual investigation, independence on calm abiding, in which the mind is internally set in equipoise, a lot of clauses here, right? One achieves a special insight at observing modes and varieties. Whoa. So do you know when it talks about these expression, modes and varieties, it's just a way of translating a particular kind of a phrase that's translated from the Sanskrit into Tibetan. The modes of phenomena means when you have an understanding of the conventional nature of phenomena, because they arise in many different varieties. The ultimate nature of phenomena, from the Mahayana points of view, let's say the Chittamatra or the Madhyamaka points of view, the ultimate mode of phenomena, ultimate nature of phenomena, is all of the same taste, right? So there's no different kinds of modes. When we talk about the varieties, we're talking about the different kinds of appearances to our mind. When you sit, and many different appearances come, pleasant, unpleasant, happy, unhappy. Those are all called varieties. And that's a synonym that refers to conventional truth. And when it talks about the modes, the mode of phenomena, that means the way she's translating here, that means the ultimate nature. So when you can have special insight, that means vipassana, observing, taking as its observation the conventional nature, all the different kinds of varieties of phenomena. Or you can take special insight analyzing the ultimate mode of phenomena, which is emptiness. So one is called supramundane vipassana, that which analyzes the ultimate nature, and mundane vipassana is that which analyzes the various kinds of modes of phenomena, I guess. So when it says it acts as a support for knowledge, so when we talk about, you know the 3 higher trainings? Carrie, do you know the 3 higher trainings? I'm talking about Buddhist higher trainings. The higher training in Victoria knows, I know. Higher training in what? Ethics, or morality, yeah. Vinaya, yeah. Concentration and wisdom. Why are they called higher trainings? Sometimes they're called trainings. What's the difference between the trainings and the higher trainings? Do you remember? We talked sometime. Was that? You're not highly trained yet. You're trained. Do you remember? So the Buddhist, like say, training in morality is something that's shared with non-Buddhist practitioners, training in ethics or morality, training in concentration, even a certain kind of training in wisdom. But when the practices are conjoined with renunciation of samsara as a motivating factor, they're called higher trainings. It doesn't have to be necessarily conjoined with bodhicitta, but the higher trainings means the reason you're practicing ethics, morality, is to get out of samsara, not just to have an attractive form in the next lifetime. Because one of the results, the karmic results of practicing morality is to have many results, but one of the results is to have an attractive form. And the result of generosity is to have resources and so forth. So practicing these kinds of practices simply to have those results is not called higher training in those things. Higher training in morality is with the goal of achieving liberation. And on the basis of higher training of morality, we can develop the higher training of concentration, and in turn develop the higher training of wisdom. It's said that they really act as a support of one another. So it says acting as a support for knowledge. So here, concentration, meditative stabilization, acts as a support for the higher training of wisdom and for wisdom itself, because the example that Geshe Repton gave of the camera, if the camera is moving, you don't get a clear picture, even though it's, even though you have clarity. Let's say you have a good lens, you have a Nikon or a Leica or something like that. The classic example that's given is in holding a candle in a monastery that's been destroyed. You're going through some ruins and you see the frescoes on the wall. You're trying to see them in some dark room. If there's a wind going and the candle is flickering, you only get an image of the fresco for an instant, and then things disappear, and then you get another image of that. So that's like trying to develop wisdom, insight, without concentration. It doesn't lead to, a deep insight. You need concentration. You have to be able to focus on something continually in order to develop wisdom of it, to see it clearly for some length of time, to leave an imprint in your mind. So I believe that's one of the meanings here, the function, the feature of the function of meditative stabilization, of here we could say concentration, is that it acts as a support for wisdom. Yes?
What is it, at the bottom of that paragraph, what is that kind of meditation called, where it says, in dependence on calm abiding in which the mind is internally set and equipoised, one achieves a special insight observing modes and varieties. What is that meditation called? Does that have a name?
That's called the mundane and supramundane vipassana, I think. In order to achieve the mundane vipassana or supramundane, that means the supramundane vipassana from the Mahayana point of view would mean wisdom realizing emptiness, analyzing emptiness, and then Even when it's analyzed and realized, it's still called vipassana. You don't have to be analyzing. Vipassana has when we call special insight. It's not only analytical, in a sense, it's actually nature of wisdom. So at one point it's analyzing, it's the ability, like putting the fish, a little goldfish, in a calm body of water that you've developed calmness and clarity in through developing calm abiding. Then learning how within that calm mind to analyze. And when you are able to analyze without causing the delusions to arise or for any kind of distractions to arise, analyzing the ultimate nature of phenomena with that special insight brings about the wisdom that realizes emptiness, first conceptually, then non-conceptually. So that would be talking about the modes, the special insight observing modes, the mode of phenomena, the way it exists, everything exists. And the varieties of phenomena means the special insight, the mundane vipassana, that would be observing, say, the various faults and qualities of the desire realm compared to the qualities of the form realm and so forth. Other kinds of analyses that can be done with vipassana. So again, a quote from the Bodhisattva-charyavatara, having understood that afflictions are destroyed by special insight that is fully endowed with calm abiding, first seek calm abiding. That is achieved through taking joy in non-attachment to the world. So if you realize the ultimate goal is to have the wisdom that realizes emptiness, it's not to be abandoned. We're discussing that some teacher had said something about wisdom was to be abandoned. Maybe we're not sure of the terminology.
It was Master Shantideva. It wasn't somebody.
Oh, okay. Mati, you sure? Maybe that was the interpretation of Master Shantideva.
It was
Okay.
my interpretation,
Okay.
and I didn't have the exact words.
Okay.
So,
Okay, we'll leave it at that then. So, knowing that,
somebody.
say, yeah. No, Shantideva, maybe Shantideva didn't say that. That's what I was saying. Someone's interpretation of that. So knowing that, as it says here, the klesha, the afflictions, the delusions, are destroyed in total by the wisdom that realizes emptiness. That means the special insight that is fully endowed with calm abiding. Because just special insight endowed with calm abiding is not enough, but that is a prerequisite. You have to have first calm abiding, then develop special insight within that, and then focus that on the ultimate nature of reality. It's that kind of wisdom that can eliminate the delusions. Knowing that, the person first seeks calm abiding, as Shantideva does say, as I understand it in the Bodhisattva-charyavatara. That is achieved through taking joy in non-attachment in the world. What is achieved through taking joy in non-attachment? Calm abiding is achieved essentially through non-attachment to the world. So it comes about through the higher practice of ethics and morality, because higher practice means based on renunciation, non-attachment, right? Also, the scripture on discipline, the Vinaya, repeatedly teaches the ways in which training in meditative stabilization depends on the training in ethics, and also teaches how the training in wisdom depends on the training in meditative stabilization. In this manner, those who wish for liberation from their hearts, it doesn't mean to be liberated from your heart, but liberate from the depth of your heart, those who wish for liberation should regard these great texts as supreme quintessential instructions. So, for instance, the example that's sometimes given also is that the higher training in morality is like the strength of the logger, what do you call it? Timber person. I don't want to use gender in exclusive. Lumberjane, okay? Lumberjack or Jane. Okay? The ability to put the axe in the same place each time is like concentration. Otherwise, you're not. First of all, if you don't have strength, you're not going to cut down the big tree. Even if you have a sharp axe, which is like the wisdom, or the ability to place it in the same place each time. If it's just a really dull blade and you've got one of these big redwoods, it's going to take you, forever if you get it. First of all, you need the strength. That's like the higher training in morality that acts as a basis for successful development of the higher training concentration, which is like putting the axe in the same place each time, right? Otherwise, you're hitting here, then one time you're hitting here, one time you're hitting here. And then the sharpness of the axe is analogous to the higher training in wisdom. So they act as supports sequentially for one another. Okay, so let's go on, then we can go back if there are any questions. The fifth of these object ascertaining mental factors is the one that we call wisdom, or prajna. The Tibetans call sherab. Regarding the entity of prajna, the Pramana Samuccaya, the Compendium of Knowledge, says, what is wisdom? It strongly differentiates the qualities of things. I mean, it just means it's properly differentiating the qualities of things that are to be examined. It has the function of overcoming doubt. So remember, one day earlier, one of us asked, how about discrimination? Remember the omnipresent mental factor discrimination? They said, what's the difference between that and wisdom? Had you asked, Thea?
No, but I remember someone asking that question.
Did you? It was Venerable. Just a wee question. And here, wisdom has the function of overcoming doubt. So discrimination doesn't necessarily lead to a mind which is free of doubt. This is differentiating the qualities of something, not just distinguishing a mark, but analyzing, distinguishing the qualities and faults of something. As has been said, wisdom is a knower, consciousness, that individually differentiates the faults and good qualities of things that are to be examined. So when it says faults and qualities, it doesn't have to, you might think that's limiting in some kind of in its analysis. But in anything you're analyzing, knowing, if you're analyzing the faults of bad behavior and the benefits, the qualities of good behavior, of virtuous karma and so forth, that's brought about through the faculty of this mental factor, wisdom. Objects that are to be examined by wisdom are of three types: virtuous objects, non-virtuous objects, and the unpredicted or unspecified, lungmaten, we say. So when Buddha talked about one of the main categories of karma, we say virtuous karma, non-virtuous, and sometimes people say neutral, but the actual the texts actually say unpredicted, or as she's translated here, unspecified. The Buddha didn't predict that this is virtuous or non-virtuous. Therefore, it brings about consequences which the Buddha didn't predict, which are neutral consequences. But the karma itself is just called unspecified or unpredicted, lungmaten. John?
So when you say virtuous, non-virtuous, and unspecified, what doesn't that cover?
That covers everything. Mm-hmm. Three types of objects that are to be examined by wisdom. Wisdom individually differentiates the faults and good qualities of these. So therefore, now here's a subject that's mentioned in passing, and I'm not going to be able to elucidate it very much right now, but just a little bit from the words here. There are four ways of reasoning, four types of reasoning for differentiating the faults and good qualities. So this comes up in many, many different circumstances. When you, like for instance, when you're doing meditation, you should apply your wisdom with 4 kinds of reasoning. The reasoning of the ability of something to perform a function. Here it says functional reasoning. Chawa chepe rikpa. That could also be taken as the reasoning of agents and their actions, or the ability to perform actions. So analyzing in your own experience whether certain things bring other kinds of results. Reasoning of dependence. Logical reasoning, which in Tibetan actually, in the Sanskrit, there's a different word also, tepe drupe rikpa, which literally means reasoning which is established by correctness or appropriateness, which talking about logical reasoning, using syllogisms and so forth, and the reasoning of nature, chunegi rikpa, or dharmata. So sometimes, without correlating with these 4, we talk about when you do Lanrim meditation and you're meditating on perfect human rebirth or on the inevitability of death or the nature of samsara, the suffering of the lower realms and so forth. There are different ways that you try to analyze to bring about some understanding. You analyze whether this explains everything that you can think of, whether there are any internal contradictions, and so forth, whether this is logically consistent, and so forth. So this kind of related with these 4 reasonings. I'll see if I can find in some of the other scriptures a more elaborate explanation of these 4 reasonings, but often they're just mentioned, and they're not given much commentary.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Would you mind repeating succinctly the 4 reasons?
You can find them if you have a chance later on page 32. They're called functional reasoning, reasoning of dependence, logical reasoning, and reasoning of nature. I'll try to find, here there doesn't mention, in some other commentaries I haven't seen usually much discussion of this, although the Buddha talked about this very often. So when one gains certainty through analysis with these 4 types of reasoning, doubt will be overcome. Hence, its functional feature, the function of wisdom, is overcoming doubt. With these meanings in mind, the foremost omniscient one, which means Tsongkhapa, in his text called the Virtuous Beginning, Middle, and End, here's his beginning and end. There's a text that Lama Tsongkhapa wrote, I think we talked about it before, called the Virtuous Beginning, Middle, and End, that's said to be very auspicious to have studied and to read and so forth. There he says, having properly examined day and night the meaning of what has been heard with the 4 types of reasoning, may I eradicate doubt with analytical awareness that arises from contemplating the objects that are to be contemplated. So here it talks about 4 kinds of reasoning, although those are not the 4 divisions of wisdom. Those are not divisions of wisdom. Usually we say, how many divisions of wisdom are there? Prajna. 16?
I don't know, isn't that what you said one time? No, that's intimacy, excuse me.
Mm-hmm. Anyone know?
According to which school?
Usually most schools have, all the schools have more or less the same presentation. How many?
There's 5.
5 kinds of wisdom. What are they?
wisdom of similarities, wisdom of discrimination, wisdom of accomplishment, and I can't remember.
Oh, you're thinking of from the tantric point of view, yeah.
Well, those are
No.
the only, well, I don't know the others.
No, well, usually you know. Sometimes we say there are four, but usually we talk about three. We say the wisdom arising from hearing,
Oh,
the wisdom arisen from contemplation, the wisdom arisen from meditation, right? And what's the fourth? Then what's the fourth wisdom? Innate or inborn. So, what does that mean? Where did that come from? You just have it. You didn't have to. You didn't have to listen. You didn't have to contemplate. You didn't have to.
karma?
You did it. You did it in the past. You contemplated. You listened. You contemplated. You perhaps meditated, and that left a certain predisposition for a certain acuity of mind, a certain ability to analyze. Now, some people are born with sharper minds because of that familiarity. That's why the study that we do now is not in vain, even if you don't feel like I didn't realize anything. We're leaving imprints to have that kind of innate wisdom, and certainly, hopefully, developing the ability this lifetime to make other insights through that. So what's a distinguishing characteristic? What's the meaning of wisdom arisen from hearing? Does anyone know? Venerable, do you know? Do you hear me? Yeah, wisdom of listening. Actually, the word is arisen. The word arisen is in there, although people might abbreviate it. The wisdom of listening. This sounds like there's a certain wisdom in listening. You know, it's wise to listen. That's not what it means. The wisdom arisen from hearing or listening. Victoria, you have some insight.
I have an idea, so I'll throw it out there.
Some innate wisdom, even though you didn't.
Is it more an intellectual understanding? Like when you're listening to teachings, you can understand the concept of what the Lama is teaching. Then you have to go and think about it later, which is more the contemplation.
I think that part of it is simply understanding the meaning of the words. Someone says, death is impermanent. Death is certain. Death is certain. So there's a certain wisdom that arises on that level. But if you don't analyze that, if you don't contemplate that, if someone else says, come on, death is not certain, Larry Ellison is having, is that how you say his name? Ellison is having his body cryogenically preserved, and he'll come back in the future when they solve all these diseases. So death is not definite. So you might think, only having understood something on the verbal level through hearing. Although there is a certain wisdom that arises that way, it's not very stable. One has to investigate that through analysis, through contemplation. And when you do contemplate something in different ways through these means of analysis, these reasonings, then you develop a deeper kind of wisdom called wisdom arisen from contemplation. There, a deeper kind of insight is, deeper kind of wisdom, more than just on the verbal level. What you should be doing, Lama Tsongkhapa said, is what we should be doing is while we're listening and we're understanding the words, to put those into some kind of analysis while we're listening, and to try to go to the third step. There's a third step in that. There's a deeper kind of insight that's developed then through meditating on what has been first heard, or you could say studied. Hearing doesn't mean only hearing through the ears. It can mean actually reading. In the time of the Buddha, as I understand it, there were not that many texts that were written. There were written texts. The Buddha did talk about the benefits of writing down the texts and so forth. But even through many centuries in Tibet, it was not considered a prerequisite for the monks, all the monks, to learn how to read and write, how to write particularly, or how to compose or grammar or so forth. Sometimes they thought it as a kind of a diversion, something that would a distraction. So there's a certain wisdom that comes about through hearing or study. But then when that is reading. Like you read the books, death is definite. Okay, I got that. Then if you contemplate that, if you put that into your own thinking, whether it be in everyday life, walking around or sitting at the table thinking, or in what looks like meditation. We might think that that's the wisdom arisen from meditation when you're doing analytical meditation, right? Death is definite. Actually, this would be the kind of analysis that would be going on there would generate the wisdom arisen from contemplation, because you're contemplating that from many different ways using logic and so forth. Once you've got an insight into that, you've got the taste of the meditation, then you focus your mind single-pointedly on that, and in so doing, you can develop a deeper kind of insight called the wisdom arisen from meditation. So usually in the scriptures, there are very precise definitions of some of these. Like the wisdom arisen from meditation, I think, involves the development only from the point of developing a union of tranquil abiding and penetrative insight. Then you have the ability to develop that the wisdom developed from meditation, even though we have something similar now. Once you've, like say for instance, you first hear of the benefits of love or what it's like, and you hear of that, and you develop a certain wisdom of understanding that. Then you contemplate how it's possible to love sentient beings, and you actually get a certain taste of that and a little insight of that. You know, how it's possible to feel friendliness or love, and you know, that happiness in the others being happy, being joyous that even your enemies have happiness. Once you have that, even if you just focus on that single-pointedly, try to keep that in focus, that's a little bit like wisdom arisen from meditation. So there's 3 different levels like that can be achieved this lifetime through effort. And as Don said, there's also a kind of wisdom that we have innately in our mind from having cultivated these kinds of wisdom in previous lifetimes. Wisdom, what we call innate wisdom. Okay, I think in Geshe Rapton's text. Okay, let me read you here something that can embellish that. Here he translates wisdom as intelligence, prajna. What do you think? Is that intelligence?
No.
No, what?
You're asking if it's a good translation?
Oh, okay. It's not a good translation.
I think it's a translation which has the potential to confuse us, because...
It's an unintelligent translation, in other words.
Exactly.
Okay. To translate it as that intelligence. Because? Why couldn't that confuse us?
Because in the West, when we think of intelligence, we think of being able to score high on the SAT or having a high IQ. And in the world of Buddhism, there are 2 kinds of intelligence. One is spiritual intelligence, and the other is intellectual intelligence. And a person can be an intellectual dullard, but still gain the ultimate wisdom. And so use of the word intelligence here to indicate wisdom, I think, can be deceptive.
A person can be an intellectual dullard, but gain the ultimate wisdom. Possible, maybe. Intellectuals, if we mean by intellectual, here it says intelligence, so you're aligning that with a sense of intellectual. We're talking about intellectuals and non-intellectuals.
Yeah. So
But even then, you have to go beyond the associations we have with those words, because those are loaded words too. Some people say, I'm an intellectual.
It seems like in our Western society anyway, people can be an intellectual, but not necessarily
Intelligent?
be wise.
Right. They might not even be intelligent for that matter. Right? Excuse me. Yeah.
It's a social
So,
class.
Right?
It's a social class.
It's a social class, yeah. It's a certain kind of label that people put on themselves, you know. Yeah, so I don't find this so illuminating either, intelligence. But there is some reason for, I mean, it's useful to think of the pros and cons of these words, because that in itself we can begin to recognize that we're just trying to graft onto these concepts English words. The words themselves are not going to be perfect matches. They'll only start to fit once we've associated with the word the definition. It's just like when I say Surf City coffee, I know that I associate that word with this, some particular kind of taste of, what was it, soy mocha, something very nice. But that word itself could be applied to anything. It doesn't have to apply to that. But once you've made the application of the name to a particular thing, then that for you that's sufficient. That word can work. You can call it anything you want. So if intelligence works for you, that's okay. He says intelligence, or what we're calling wisdom, is a distinct mental factor having the specific function of fine discrimination. Here she said strongly differentiating. It's the same. He's translating fine discrimination. Thorough discrimination, maybe we could say. It examines the characteristics or value of a recollected object. Here it says a recollected object. Did it say that there? It doesn't in the other definition. In addition, it has the functions of cutting through indecision, that's doubt, right? Through indecision and doubt with unilateral certainty. What does that mean? Makes one-pointedness, Maintaining the root of all wholesome qualities, both foreseeable and unforeseeable. That means, that you can see now qualities of the present life, maintains the root of those and those that are in the future. And it is similar to an eye that beholds, or a lamp that illuminates concealed phenomena. So sometimes we talk about the eye of wisdom, the wisdom eye, opening the third eye, opening the wisdom eye. Sherab Gimik. So it's not like as in, who was it, Lobsang Rampa? Remember, did anyone read Lobsang Rampa? Did you ever read? You read?
Tuesday.
So there was one called, did you read Opening the Third Eye?
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
It was a long time. When we were traveling to India, I remember in the 70s, early 70s, that was very popular. It turned out he was a British postman who had this feeling that he had been a Tibetan Lama. He wrote this series of books where he was supposed to be this Lama called Lobsang Rampa. Oh no, the author was called Lobsang Rampa. Actually, he was a British. He wasn't Indian, And he talked about the monks. And at one point, this one monk went for an operation to have his third eye open. So they cut open here, and he had to have bandages around for weeks until, completely. That's not at all what is understood by opening the wisdom eye or the third eye. It's not something you do surgically. Okay? So opening the wisdom eye means, what would that mean? How would you begin to open the wisdom eye? Because if the wisdom eye is not open, it's because you don't have innate wisdom, right, from previous lives. So you would first listen to the teachings. You would seek out hearing and study. That's what a lot of you are very, conscientiously come week after week, even with when there are other kinds of temptations and so forth. That kind of seeking out the teachings are, sometimes there's 24 is on or some other.
We were kidding. We have no temptations.
You have no temptations. Oh, whoa. Get a life. I'm joking. You have no temptations. It's very good. Or if you have no temptations, it's like, get a life. Keith has lots of temptations, but he has a life, but maybe he doesn't have as much chance to hear the teachings as you do. So it depends on what you mean by life.
I was just thinking about this intelligence and wisdom, opening up sort of the wisdom eye or whatever. And it's almost like, it's kind of like wisdom is almost like an endpoint, and intelligence is sort of like processes, the things that you gain going through getting to that endpoint.
There are not two words that I can think of in the Tibetan terminology that differentiate between those concepts. There's maybe understanding. We talk about realization and so forth, but when we talk about this particular faculty that brings about realization, that we call wisdom.
Well, I was thinking when you were saying wisdom, opening up the third eye, wisdom, the third eye, it's kind of like intelligence attached to all the six other, vision and mind and all the rest, attaching all those things together to open that. the eye of wisdom. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure.
Can you repeat that? Can't hear it.
I couldn't hear either. Thea, could you turn off the heater? Because I think it's warm enough in here, and we can't quite hear.
Well, what I was
one of
saying
the-
is there's sort of, you know, there's
A wee bit louder, John.
So we were talking about sort of these 6 other things: mind, and vision, and hearing, and,
So
all,
the
and all the
six,
rest.
the
So
6
So
consciousnesses.
if you take all those consciousnesses and then you add into the mix intelligence, or the striving for intelligence, and maybe if you put that whole soup together, that's what sort of creates the opening of the wisdom.
Well, our senses are kind of. Does wisdom appear? Do we have this prajna within our sense consciousnesses? Is it a mental factor in the entourage of the primary consciousness? Doesn't look like that. Because this is something that's analytical. It's something that is done with the mind, the mental consciousness. So this wisdom is the province of only the mental consciousness.
Yeah, well, I guess what
It does depend on data from the other
right,
consciousnesses.
take all that stuff and you add intelligence to it, and then out of that sort of equation comes wisdom.
Comes wisdom. You know, it's some kind of, well, okay, if you like. Let me continue reading what Geshe-Repton says here to correspond to this. The examining analytical quality of intelligence, that is wisdom here, it's an examining kind of consciousness, or it doesn't have to be only analyzing. Analyzing sounds like it's something active and hasn't come to a decision yet, right? Wisdom can be also something that same word for analyzing can mean it's come to the decision and is focusing on that. So wisdom doesn't have to be only analyzing. Do you follow what I mean? There is the question about that when you talk about vipassana. Vipassana sounds as though it's only analyzing, right? But it actually is that its nature is wisdom. It's developing wisdom through the analysis, and even when it's finished the analysis, it's still present. It's still called vipassana. It's still called. It still has the quality of prajna, of wisdom. The examining analytical quality of wisdom should not be confused with uncertain wavering between 2 alternatives of indecision. It shouldn't be confused with doubting consciousness. Due to unknowing, indecision merely fluctuates between 2 alternatives concerning an object about which there is no certainty, about which no certainty has been found. Intelligence, on the other hand, wisdom, analyzes 2 alternatives by means of differentiating the specific characteristics of an object whose fundamental presence has been ascertained. So you've perceived some object. Now you begin to differentiate. Is that good, or is that something to be cultivated or something to be avoided? You know, or is this something is this something that is beneficial or not? Is this virtuous or non-virtuous? Intelligence can be applied in unwholesome as well as wholesome pursuits. These object ascertaining mental factors are not necessarily wholesome. You might think wisdom, has to be wholesome, right? It doesn't. It's sometimes the mental factors, like when we talk about the mental factor enthusiastic perseverance, the way that it's defined only refers to the perseverance in virtuous activities, having joy in pursuing virtuous activities. But here, these mental factors can be virtuous or non-virtuous. They're a more general category. It can be applied in unwholesome as well as wholesome pursuits. It has enabled people to construct highly complex weapons of destruction, on the one hand, and on the other hand, codes of ethical conduct, on the other, meaning good codes of conduct. There are some that are destructive also. But by far the most important role it plays is that of discerning the nature of ultimate truth, selflessness. The selflessness of phenomena, the selflessness of persons. That's the most important role that this wisdom plays.
Intelligence, please.
Yeah, wisdom or intelligence. You didn't like the word intelligence.
The author is using the word intelligence.
For wisdom, yeah. They're translating it. The same word, prajna or sharab.
So this is not how I see it, because she's saying there that the intelligence can be used for negative purposes, for making bombs or doing non-virtuous acts and doing
Right.
them very efficiently and cleverly and intelligently. And I would find that hard to call wisdom.
Well, that's what I was saying, that we have to get familiar how it's used in the Buddhist terminology. Some of the words, when we talk about enthusiastic perseverance, virya, or sundru in Tibetan, that word, according to, when we talk about the mental factor, sundru, it refers only to the virtuous enthusiastic perseverance, having joy in doing virtuous things. It doesn't mean the kind of, in fact, if someone has a lot of joy in making money and harming others, serial killers or something, you say, wow, that guy's got a lot of perseverance, That's not called the mental factor perseverance because it's not the virtuous one. But this one, these are of the 5 object ascertaining mental factors. They're not classified as virtuous. They can be virtuous or non-virtuous as the, omnipresent mental factors. So although sometimes I heard a Lama in New Zealand give a lecture on these 5 from the point of view of their virtuous counterparts, neglecting the negative counterparts. But there are counterparts of each of these which can be negative. You can have concentration, be concentrated single-pointedly on some negative thing. And it still constitutes samadhi. But it's not, you're not going to be able to develop supreme, wisdom through that. For instance, black magicians, in order to develop various kinds of magical powers with evil intent, they need a certain amount of samadhi to be able to do that. And also, this kind of wisdom can be used, wisdom itself, this analytical property of the mind, it's a mental factor, something that has a particular function of analyzing qualities and faults of things. It can be used in a deficient way, in this negative way, and thinking, yeah, if I do that, I'll get more profit. And others will, then I'll become more famous, I'll become more powerful. And that kind of wisdom then can be negative.
So is it the wisdom that's negative or positive, or the use of wisdom that can be negative or positive?
Well, the wisdom itself is neither virtuous or non-virtuous. It depends on how it's being used. Okay?
In other words, they're morally neutral until there's an application.
Yeah. Whereas, for instance, anger itself, by its very present, by its very nature, creates negative karma. It is non-virtuous by nature. Okay? So intelligence or wisdom can be applied in unwholesome as well as wholesome pursuits. We mentioned that. It's by far the most important role it plays is that of discerning the nature of ultimate truth, selflessness, both for the inference as well as the immediate perception, that is the direct perception of selflessness, you need a keen intelligence, keen wisdom, sharp wisdom, for both to both develop an inferential understanding and to have a direct perception. Nevertheless, without being mounted upon a firm concentration of mental quiescence, calm abiding, or shamatha, it alone, wisdom alone, lacks any power to cause one to progress along the path to liberation. Similarly, calm abiding, mental quiescence, and the various other levels of concentration also lack any liberating power by themselves alone. Just concentration alone, ability to remain in concentration a long time, that doesn't have any liberating quality by itself alone. We need to have a union of concentration and wisdom. Thus, it is essential to combine the firm concentration of mental quiescence, what we translate calm abiding, with the intelligent discrimination of penetrative insight. He goes on to say on 121, there are 4 kinds of intelligence, 4 kinds of wisdom, which we were talking about before. That which is inborn, what did we call it? Innate, inborn. That which occurs from learning, what we call hearing or study, you could call it learning, tobe. Usually the word tobe means to listen or hear, but it also means to, from learning. That which occurs from reflection, that's what we're translating as contemplation, and that which occurs or arises from meditation. Inborn intelligence is the natural acuity of mind that we inherit from our actions in previous existences. Thus, it varies greatly from individual to individual. The other three forms of intelligence, or wisdom, are the outcomes of intellectual training and spiritual discipline that we follow in this life. Furthermore, we can distinguish between intelligence that analyzes what actually exists, that is, for instance, selflessness, and intelligence that analyzes what conventionally exists. So this is talking about the modes and varieties. We can talk about the wisdom of the mode of phenomena, that means the ultimate nature, selflessness, emptiness, or the wisdom that analyzes the conventional, the varieties of phenomena. So we've gone over so far we've talked about 10 of the 51 mental factors, those that fall in the categories of the omnipresent, which are included also in the sense consciousnesses, all consciousnesses that are fully qualified. But you remember there's some exceptions. The first moments of consciousness when you're waking up, moments of sleep, when you're beginning to lose consciousness, the birth consciousness, the death consciousness, not all of them will necessarily be present, such as Venerable's question about contact. First there's going to be contact, then there's going to be the first instant of feeling and so forth when you first wake up. They're there in unmanifest forms, first of all. Then we talked about the 5 object ascertaining mental factors, which for the Mahayana point of view are only present in the mental consciousness, for the most part. And we finished up with wisdom. We talked basically, although this text by Isha Gelsen doesn't talk about the 4 kinds of wisdom, at least I didn't see here. It's important to know that wisdom is of those categories. The wisdom arisen, the innate wisdom, so that's sort of a karmic consequence of past lifetimes, and then the wisdom arisen from hearing, contemplation, and meditation. So it's a little bit like nature-nurture. You know the question of nature-nurture? Why are some kids smart and others aren't? Is it due to their genes or due to their khakis? Is it due to their genes or their upbringing? They say nature meaning the genetic makeup, right? From a Buddhist perspective, even that is not the sort of really the nature. The nature is what's the innate kind of qualities that are in our mind from previous lives. And so that predisposes us to take rebirth within an embryo that has the capacity for certain features, certain capacities and certain experiences. So that would be called nature. And then, of course, that can be embellished by nurture. In this case, the nurture of wisdom would be seeking out hearing, seeking out learning, and so forth, contemplating that, studying that, and then developing the ability to meditate on that. What's that? Oh, you're just using another thing. Okay. So, the nature-nurture question. So it's always a little bit of both, it seems. And then we read this at the beginning, but just to complete it again on page 33, why are these 5 mental factors, it says intention, but we said it must be what?
Aspiration.
Aspiration and so forth. Why are they called object ascertaining? And since these mental factors hold objects through apprehending the individual features of the object, they are said to individually ascertain objects. I thought the translation there wasn't particularly elucidating for me. Let's see if it mentions here. Here at the beginning of the section, on page 116, aspiration, appreciation, recollection, concentration, and intelligence are said to be the mental factors that ascertain their objects because they perform the function of ascertaining their particular objects by means of distinguishing a specific characteristic of the objective field. For example, aspiration ascertains that which is desirable within the objective field. Appreciation, that which has been understood as ascertains that which has been understood as being valuable. Remember, Lisa, this is that one we were talking about. they translate as appreciation. Recollection ascertains that which has been born in mind. It means what has already been experienced. When mind is actively engaged in a task, be it wholesome or unwholesome, all of these mental factors are constantly at work, giving direction, coherence, and meaning to the train of our thought and behavior. Okay, so let's go now and begin the next section. In this presentation, the next section talks about the virtuous mental factors, of which in the Abhidharma Samachaya, the Mahayana Abhidharma, there are 11 virtuous mental factors. I'm not sure if that's the same in the Abhidharma Kosha. So these are faith, shame and embarrassment, then the three roots of virtue. We say non-attachment, non-hatred, and non-ignorance. Effort, or what we could call perseverance. Pliancy, this is the end point, which was the ultimate antidote to laziness. Remember we said faith gave rise to aspiration, which gave rise to effort, and then you could actually develop pliancy, mental and physical pliancy. Conscientiousness, which is somewhat in the similar category to shame and embarrassment, being conscientious about one's activities. Equanimity refers to a particular, very special mental factor, which has to be applied when you're developing single-pointed concentration. It doesn't talk about equanimity in general. It's talking about a mental factor that knows to stop applying the vigilance or the alertness or the introspection that one had expended some mental effort on, watching whether there are distractions. Once the mind is so trained, you don't have to apply that. If you still apply some effort in being vigilant, you can't actually develop single-pointed concentration. So that's a mental factor that has to be applied at a particular time, which is virtuous. And non-harmfulness. Here in John Donne's book, he said avihimsa. Usually we say ahimsa, isn't it? When what's the famous thing in India? Non-violence. Isn't it ahimsa?
I've heard it, ahimsa.
Ahimsa. Here, in his text, he had avihimsa. I'm not sure if that's right. Maybe avihimsa. Oh, I see, because it's nambar visewa. Avihimsa. It means the same thing as that. So, this is useful because now we're talking about mental factors which, by their very presence in the primary consciousness, cause the consciousness to be virtuous or non-virtuous. So by the application, whatever our mind moves to, by the mental factor intention, we will be creating virtuous karma because of the presence in these. So you don't have to only be making, you think, oh, I can't create any virtue because I don't have any plaster left to make satsas. I can't get to the gompa to make prostrations. I can't, I lost my prayer books. I can't make any virtue. No, the main kind of virtuous karma is through the activity of the mind. The first of these mental factors that's virtuous is something by its very nature creates virtue, is the mental factor faith. So merely cultivating faith, while the mind is in a state of faith, you create virtuous karma. That's nice to know, huh? So let's check here. Faith, its Sanskrit word is shraddha. Is that a comment? Do you know any Indian ladies named Shraddha? Sometimes there's some. In Tibetan we say teba. Teba. So regarding the entity or nature of faith, the Abhidharma Samachaya, compendium of knowledge, says, what is faith? It is conviction, clarity, or wishing with respect to an existent, something that exists, that is endowed with excellent qualities and power. It has the function of acting as a support for aspiration. Remember when we talked about developing aspiration. We said that faith in the Madhyanta Vibhanga by Maitreya, and in the Buddhist scriptures in general, it mentions how of the different faults of concentration that have to be eliminated in order to develop calm abiding. The first fault was laziness. The ultimate antidote of laziness is pliancy, when you're completely supple. You have no problem applying yourself to virtuous activities. And that is brought about through enthusiastic perseverance. Enthusiastic perseverance takes place, practicing concentration takes place because of aspiration. And aspiration comes about because you have faith in these qualities of concentration. So you would apply yourself to it. So that's what it means. It acts as a support for aspiration, faith does. So the three kinds of faith. So here she translates, Siggy's translated as clarifying faith, faith of conviction, and wishing faith. As has been said above, faith is a knower, consciousness, it's a mental factor, right? That has the aspect of conviction, clarity, or wishing. It serves as a direct antidote for, not surprisingly, non-faith. It's come as a big surprise to you, right? It has the function of acting as a support for aspiration. Oh no, I'm sorry. When divided, faith is of three types. We say, in Tibetan, we say, Dangwe Tepa. So they translate it as clarifying faith. Sometimes we say lucid faith. Have you ever seen that translation? Lucid faith. So it's a faith that causes the mind to become clear or lucid. Okay. That doesn't mean none of these are necessarily blind faith. We'll talk about the difference between that and these. The faith of conviction, Yiche Kitepa, or believing faith, and wishing faith or longing faith. Okay, John, you had a question? Sorry.
I do. A number of times it said something is a knower. Faith is a knower. What's meant by something?
It means that it is a conscious phenomena. It's not just an object or some kind of permanent phenomena. It is actually a state of mind. It is a consciousness. It is in this case, faith is a mental factor, right? When we talk about the mental factors, faith maybe can be we could say, I have a faithful mind in general. So the whole mind is influenced by the presence of that faith that's in the mind. So the whole mind takes on the entity of being, having faith. So what are the qualities of faith? It either has developed a lucidity or limpidity or a clearness of the mind, calmness of the mind, or a wishing, or a conviction, a belief, strong conviction with respect to that which exists and is endowed with excellent qualities and power. Simply having faith that George Bush will be able to pull us out of, I'm joking, the recession or whatever, that would not be called faith, even if it were to be true, which is not, but I'm joking. That would not be called faith, because faith here is with respect to objects that are excellent, that are endowed with excellent qualities and power, such as the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and so forth, and things that are true, such as the existence of past and future lives and so forth. The belief in which, the faith in which, is conducive to our spiritual practice. So just having faith that your friend will bring back your car, that's not called this mental factor. They borrow your car. Or that they'll be faithful to you. That's not called faith. I have faith. My partner will be faithful to me. In the worldly sense, we call it faith, but it's not this mental factor faith. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm not clear on what clarity, faith of clarity means. Oh, you were just gonna go there.
And
Okay.
had Dorji read to the bottom of the page. He doesn't have the text. He has so many things in front of him, computers, and someday we have to turn the camera on Dorji because he always photographs the rest. Yeah. Okay, there we go. There we go. Take a look at his computer. Can you see the computer looking at itself? Will it focus down? It won't go down toward the computer and all of this stuff. Dorji? It can't focus down on the computer. No, it won't go down. Okay. So here, the first, it actually says what clarifying. What is it? Lucid faith or clarifying faith is a clear mind. It doesn't mean clear mind in general because we have our clear light nature of the mind. It doesn't mean that. It is a clear mind which is brought about by or engendered by seeing the excellent qualities of those so endowed with those qualities, such as the three jewels. So sometimes that might be called, people might think that's blind faith. Simply being in the presence of beings that are endowed with good qualities and perceiving those qualities brings about a certain calmness and clarity of the mind. Clarity here, I think, implies like the legendary gems that the Chakravartin emperors had. If the water is polluted by mud and everything, they put in some gem and the water becomes limpid. All of the mud sinks. So like that, the presence of this gem of faith, if that's present in the mind, all the doubt and anger and worry and depression and desires, what else do you have? Pride and jealousy and, low self-esteem and everything sort of subsides because of the presence of that mind. Okay. Why is it called clarifying? For example, when one places a water purifying gem in dirty water, the murkiness of the water is immediately cleared away. Similarly, when faith is generated, the murkiness of the mind, the darkness of mind, all of the presence of all these things that keep us from seeing things clearly, is cleared away. Whereupon all excellent qualities of realization become suitable to arise in one's continuum. It's difficult for good qualities to arise when you're depressed, when you have low self-esteem, when you're angry, when you're incredibly desirous, when you're unsatisfied. Difficult for good qualities to arise because the mind is kind of obscured by those. So faith is a very useful prerequisite. One of the reasons that of the various kinds of objects of concentration, remember we talked about the various objects that you can use for concentration. One that is useful in all cases is to visualize Buddha, because by familiarity with that, simply bringing to mind Buddha's presence, that can engender faith in the consciousness, and in so doing, your meditative session becomes virtuous. Whereas meditating on something else, you could meditate on the earth totality, or let's say the earth element, or something like that. You could meditate on something else which is neutral by nature. You would not necessarily be creating virtuous karma. You follow what I'm saying? So that simply visualizing Buddha will create something from the sight of the object too, some virtue, but it can engender a state of limpid faith, clarifying faith, that, in the presence, if we're in the presence of our guru, someone whom we've developed a lot of confidence and faith in, and know their qualities for some period of time, merely being in their presence. Wasn't it Theo, when Theo was cooking for Kurti Senchab Rinpoche and his attendant and everything, I think your experience with just being in their presence, the mind was just everything's okay, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of an example of lucid faith. The second one, faith of conviction, is stronger now. It's something that we should try to strive for, because we might have a lucid kind of faith, which has a certain, I think, my understanding, has a certain amount of karmic, kind of like the inborn element to it. Some of the lucid faith comes about from conviction, the faith of conviction, but faith of conviction is the gaining of conviction through contemplating, or belief, through contemplating the modes of dependent arising, cause and effect, and so forth that are taught by the conqueror. Not only that, that you can have faith of conviction that the Buddha, the Guru, or the teacher, or our spiritual friends are objects of veneration and so forth by analyzing. So faith of conviction, there's a difference between faith and actual wisdom. Faith is something which is not yet actual, doesn't necessarily have the component of wisdom, right? Faith comes about through experience, the faith of conviction. You become convinced of something. You have that kind of belief or faith. It may not actually have come about through realization. Okay? Then the third kind of faith is called wishing faith or longing faith. It is, for example, or for instance, having contemplated the modes of the Four Noble Truths, the way in which the Four Noble Truths exist. Having contemplated the modes of the Four Noble Truths, ascertained true sufferings and true origins as object of abandonment. That's what you've understood. You've ascertained that. You've realized that true sufferings and the source or the cause of suffering are objects to be abandoned. Those of the Four Noble Truths, the first two are to be abandoned. The second two are to be practiced or to be developed, right? The path, the truth of cessation, or the truth of the path. And true cessations and true paths are objects of attainment. Having ascertained that, and having understood that these can be attained, it is possible to attain cessation of suffering and the achievement of cessation of suffering and so forth. If one makes proper effort, the faith thinking, I shall definitely obtain them. This is an example of wishing faith or longing faith. So it comes about by knowing that certain states of mind are possible. So wishing for that. Wishing faith doesn't mean like, oh, I wish I was Buddha. You know, I wish everything. I wish I was smarter. That's just wishing, right? Wishing. What's the difference between wishing and wishing faith? What do you think, Venerable?
Sounds like it doesn't come. This wishing faith is through ascertaining certain objects. And
But still, it has in the end
having a clear ascertainment of the objects that you want to have.
a certainty about certain truths, certain things. Then, knowing that it's possible to attain them, having certainty that it's possible, then developing the aspiration to attain them. So it's faith in the possibility that these things are attainable and wishing to attain them. Does that make sense? Let's see, in terms of these divisions, what Geshe-Rakden's text says. Faith. Faith is a distinct mental factor that, when referring to such things as the law of cause and effect, the triple gem, and so forth, produces a joyous state of mind, free of the turmoil of the root and secondary afflictions, proximate afflictions. So when faith is present, the delusions cannot be present in the mind at the same time, because the mind cannot be both virtuous and non-virtuous at the same time. So if your mind is non-virtuous, by putting it into a state of faith, that can cause the non-virtuous state to be subjugated, to be eliminated. It has the function of acting as the basis for generating an aspiration for wholesome qualities that have not yet been generated, increasing any such aspiration already generated. Those are two functions. In brief, it acts as the doorway through which all positive qualities manifest. Faith or confidence, here he translates also it as confidence. Yeah, that's a good, have confidence in the law of cause and effect. I have faith. Faith almost to a certain kind of mind almost sounds a bit religious, right? You know, like some.
It's self-negating.
Pardon?
It's self-negating. It takes the personal aspect of I'm making this choice out of it, and therefore it becomes blind.
As though it's blind. Yeah, because we use the word blind faith. Here, blind confidence, if we talked about confidence, is there such a thing as blind confidence? What would that mean?
That would be stupid. That would be saying dark light.
What about saying Buddha is the true refuge? There's some Tibetan lamas, some Tibetan geshes, I don't know if they call them lamas, some Tibetan geshes, and first coming to the West, they give refuge to the people, and they say, you know, they just sit and they just make the statement, Buddha is the perfect object of refuge. There's no other refuge other than him. Almost sounds like what I heard in church as a little boy or something. And as though merely hearing those words, you should have faith. Maybe if you had faith in that individual, you'd have a certain kind of faith. But that would be maybe similar to that kind of level of faith, if indeed you develop some confidence in that, might be kind of what we call blind faith due to some imprint in the past. Sometimes you'd be totally resistant to that, right? You wouldn't believe it at all. If you did have some confidence or faith in those things that were true in, and faith in objects that did have power, like that might be what is meant in the West by blind faith. But here, that would be, even when we talk about lucid faith, clarifying faith, that is brought about by seeing the excellent qualities. Okay? So it's by some kind of direct perception, being in the presence of something, not just blind faith, not just someone saying something. Faith or confidence is extremely important as the foundation of the practice of Dharma. The Buddha once said that just as a burnt seed is unable to produce a seedling, likewise a mind devoid of faith is unable to cultivate anything wholesome. You have to have some faith. Okay? You know, to even to make the first step, even to do your nune first, even to put some bowl on the altar, say someone says that you'll create virtuous karma by making these offerings, or by studying this will be beneficial. You have to have some kind of there is another word that sometimes comes when we talk about refuge. What are the two causes of refuge?
Fear and faith.
Fear and faith, usually it says, right? Sometimes in the text it says fear and hope. Fear of suffering. And at least, even if not faith yet, at least some hope. You know, I'm going to try this. You know, so that would be kind of a precursor of faith, right? I hope this works. Give it a shot, right? Can't harm. I think I've mentioned this before. There's a beautiful little quotation at the beginning of a text by Stephen Beyer called The Cult of Tara. Has anyone ever used that? Stephen Beyer is an intellectual scholar. He used to be at the University of Wisconsin. I'm not sure he's still there. He used to be a Buddhist scholar. Now he's into business or something else. And anyway, he's a bright guy. But he at the beginning of the text on Tara, there was a quotation from Scotland, perhaps, or Ireland. I can't remember. A Scottish farmer. I think it was a Scottish farmer. So this is quite appropriate. And when asked, not farmer, shepherd, when asked why he drew the magic circle around his sheep at night. You know what a magic circle is? To protect from the demons or other things, you know, in some kind of ritual. Maybe Celtic. Yeah. When asked why he drew the magic circle around his sheep at night, the shepherd answered, I'd be a damn fool if I didn't. But maybe it'll work, you know. So give it a shot. So that would not yet be at the level of, maybe that's a certain element of faith, that's more the level of hope, right? And, well, maybe, you know, no. So I think we have to start somewhere. Sounds like a strong faith, yeah.
So there's a difference in the circle because he's not focusing on a virtuous object that provides joy.
He's not focusing, well, if it were, say, that particular magic circle, yeah, maybe that's not something endowed with good qualities. So that's not what we usually call faith. Having faith in, that if you, like, say, for instance, if you had confidence or belief that going to Harvard, you would be able to have a better shot at life, would that be the mental factor faith? Because, well, although Harvard is endowed with great qualities, I don't mean to demean your alma mater, but it is not talking about the qualities that are conducive to the spiritual path. No offense, Harvard, Mother Harvard, or Father Harvard. I think it's Mother. Neuter. So that would be kind of confidence, but that wouldn't be this kind of faith.
That would be like having faith in the circle.
Yeah, similar to having maybe faith in the circle. That might be a little more reasonable. I don't know. Maybe the magic circle, which is more worthy of our confidence, Harvard education or the magic circle. Now we're getting on shaky ground, Keith. I'm not sure. Okay.
Seems like the faith is more in the bad things that could happen than drawing the circle as well. That'd be a damn fool not to try.
Yeah. Right. It's part of the fear and so forth. If we have firm confidence or faith in something, such as certainty that suffering inevitably arises from unwholesome actions, because that's not something that at first we can have an actual realization of, isn't it? Is it possible to realize that suffering arises from unwholesome actions, or is that deeply hidden?
Well, it's something that it's more difficult to understand, Sutra says, than seeing ultimate reality. It's something the Buddha sees and we can't see.
That happiness arises from virtue.
Yeah, how karma works.
Okay, now there's a difference. So Keith is not yet, how to say, delineated well. There are two levels when we talk about karma. It's said that it is possible to realize that happiness arises from virtue. That's not considered to be a deeply hidden phenomenon. What is deeply hidden with respect to karma is that by this action, giving this thing, that there will be a particular result in the future. That is called deeply hidden, and the only way that we can know to realize that kind of phenomena is on the basis of the Buddha's prediction, or the Buddha's assertion that because of this, you will have that particular result in the future. You know the story of the two very, very poor people in the time of the Buddha. The one woman, the mother, as usual, had more faith in the Buddha than the man, and she gave the last loaf of bread, some meager bread, to the Buddha. They were both practically naked. They had no other things, and the Buddha said, as a result of this, you will be born in the future as a pratika Buddha, in this and that universe, and attain nirvana and so forth. And the husband goes, oh yeah, right. You could say anything you want, from this small action, how could such a big result come? This is sort of like, this is an example of, we talk about the multiplying effect, the increase of karma. And the Buddha said just from a small seed, how a big tree, that the shadow of which can cover hundreds or thousands of carts or something, can arise. From a small action, there can be great results. So that kind of prediction is something that would be deeply, the result, the connection between the karma and that result would be deeply hidden. But it's said in the scriptures, when it talks about just the fact that virtue gives rise to happiness and unvirtue gives rise to suffering, that's something that can be realized, that is not a deeply hidden phenomenon. That's something that you can reach certainty to. But at first we just have faith in that. To have that kind of certainty in the law of cause and effect is a high realization. So, if we have firm confidence and this level faith in something, such as certainty that suffering inevitably arises from unwholesome actions, then we shall automatically be motivated to adjust our behavior accordingly and abstain from such activity. So if you have faith, you can easily avoid negative actions like that. Similarly, if we have confidence, faith in the reliability of a particular person, such as Buddha as a reliable person, or our gurus, the Dalai Lama, whatever, then we shall have no hesitation in believing what they say, and we'll have no hesitation in following any advice that they may give us. Faith does not only mean to have a reverent attitude before certain holy beings. It should be understood as a factor of mind capable of broadening and expanding one's understanding. It doesn't just mean like like being humble or respectful, taking some demeanor in the presence of the teacher. That's not necessarily even faith at all. It could be fooling yourself. There are three types of faith, and here in different order: believing faith, admiring faith, and longing faith. Actually, it sounds like completely different divisions, right? But when he gives the definitions, it seems like the same thing. We had clarifying faith, faith of conviction, and wishing faith. Here it says believing faith. Almost sounds like wishing faith, but it's not that.
That'd be the faith of conviction.
Admiring faith and longing faith. So here, believing faith is a state of complete conviction. So that's the faith of conviction. And certainty in such things as the qualities of the triple gem, the infallibility of the law of cause and effects, and so forth. It is unshakable and cannot be enticed away by other propositions. So it has a certain quality of admiration. Remember, Lisa, you were talking about not being captivated by others. Admiring faith is a state in which the object of faith is held to be particularly excellent and dear. It is a mind endowed with joyous and delightful quality. So this is actually what is translated here as clarifying faith. He calls it admiring faith. Longing faith is a state in which one has considered the object of faith to be attainable. It is thus characterized by a strongly interested longing to attain it. So once you've considered that the object of this is considered, that is contemplated, that the object of faith is attainable, such as the state of enlightenment and so forth, or nirvana or bodhicitta, then you have a strong interest in desiring to attain it. That's called longing faith or wishing faith. So here, clarifying faith is being translated in a different way, admiring faith. I'm not sure, I can't remember if I looked earlier here, in the divisions in Jeffrey Hopkins' translation of these things. Again, most of his things come from the same Yeshe Gelson's text with some other embellishments and sort of condensing some things down. So, let's see here. Faith has the aspect of clarity, conviction, or a wish to obtain. Those are how we're translating clarifying, conviction, and wishing faith. With respect to the existent, that which is existent, such as actions and their effects, the relationship between them, the possession of qualities, such as the three jewels having qualities, or powers, such as the powers of the path to actualize cessation. That's what it's talking about, power. The fact that the spiritual path has the power, the potency to eliminate our suffering and to bring about joy and so forth. It has the function of serving as a basis for aspiration. Remember we said before, the faith of clarity, or clarifying faith, is, for instance, the clarity of mind that comes through perceiving the qualities of the three jewels, including that, say, the Buddha or the Dalai Lama, someone, the Guru. It is called clarifying because just as when a water clarifying jewel is put in water, the dirtiness of the water is immediately cleansed. So when this type of faith is generated in the continuum, mental troubles are cleared away, whereupon the qualities of realization are suitable to be generated. So that doesn't mean any particular state of faith might be more than one of these faiths. It can have more than one of these qualities. For instance, a faith of conviction can also have that lucidity that allows then realizations to be easily generated.
Question.
Yeah.
So, sort of along the lines of what you were just saying, can you have wishing faith without having at least one of the other two, clarifying and the faith of conviction? And maybe both.
Well, it could be that, well, let's see, let's just finish reading this first, and we'll go back to that. The faith of conviction is, for instance, the gaining of conviction in dependent arising, or in actions and their effects, through contemplating these doctrines as set forth by the conqueror. Now, it could also mean developing conviction in the guru through, not just by being in their presence, because maybe the guru, the teacher, looks like a complete oaf, like me. Yeah. But by studying the scriptures, you can develop some kind of conviction that it's worth listening to. So that it doesn't mean only in things that you have to contemplate that you can't perceive, but sometimes even you don't perceive qualities. Is it being in the presence of His Holiness or Kriti Sencha Rinpoche or some other great lamas, some kind of clarifying faith can arise. The faith which is a wish to attain is, for instance, the faith thinking, I will definitely attain the cessation of suffering upon contemplating the Four Noble Truths, ascertaining true sufferings and true sources as objects of abandonment, and true cessations and true paths as objects of attainment, and realizing that through striving in the proper way these can be attained. So it doesn't, that particular kind of faith, in answer to John's question, the faith of aspiration or wishing faith, doesn't have to be based on the other faiths. It can be based on just some kind of realization that such things are possible, and then the faith that I can do it.
That wouldn't be the faith of conviction.
Wouldn't necessarily be the faith of conviction. This would be called a wishing faith, that it is possible to attain those states. Faith of conviction is just talking about the actual states, I think. Maybe wrong. You could check. Although the world equates faith and liking, this is a particular way of, it's a particular, how to say, misconception that can come about because of Tibetan words, tepa and gawa. Gawa means to like, like I like my friends, so I have, it's sort of the implication I have faith in them. Although the world equates faith and liking, they are not the same. Liking one's child or spouse and liking beer are cases of liking, but not of faith. Right? That's not too hard to understand. Liking beer. Maybe having faith that beer can make you inebriated or something like that. That's not actually even faith either, is it? Also, the faith which is a concern and conviction from one's depths with respect to the faults of cyclic existence is faith, but not liking. You don't like, the faults of cyclic existence, right?
I love samsara. Just kidding.
Oh, excuse me. There is an exception.
Just kidding.
That there are things that we have faith in, that negative actions bring negative results. Non-virtuous actions bring negative results, but that's not a case of liking negative actions. It's just a case of faith. We don't have quite the same kind of verbal kind of confusion in English as in Tibetan, I think. Although the faith which is a conviction and liking from the depths through contemplating the qualities of a spiritual guide or the benefits of wholesome actions and their effects is both a case of faith and liking. Furthermore, faith and respect, here's another thing that can sometimes be confused, are not the same, although they are considered to be so by the world, in the world. For instance, liking a spiritual guide is faith, but respecting a spiritual guide involves contemplating his kindness, knowing shame, which is one of the virtuous mental factors, and valuing him highly. Thus, faith and respect are different mental factors. So respect, when we talk about the meditations on devoting to the spiritual friend, respect is a little bit different than just faith. Furthermore, faith and as explained earlier, effort is the cause of all auspicious qualities, and in order to generate effort, enthusiastic perseverance, aspiration seeking those qualities is necessary. In order to generate aspiration, one must perceive those qualities and have faith of conviction in them. Thus, faith is frequently praised in the scriptures, and their commentaries is the basis of all auspicious attainments. Okay. So, that's the first of these 11 virtuous mental factors. Faith. How are we doing? How much time do we have?
On the tape? Or
Yeah,
or
on the tape. How much time?
It's 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Okay, we should have a couple minutes. So just to introduce some of the others, the next two are two that are related to one another, shame and embarrassment. I'm not sure, other people, there are many different translations for these. Here, here Jeffrey's translated shame and embarrassment. How do others translate this? Do you remember?
Self-respect.
Self-respect.
And consideration for others.
Consideration for others, and Jeffrey and Geshe. So, shame and embarrassment. Let's see how these are. These are similar kind of. Actually, we hadn't finished this section on faith, have we? But it is very much similar to that. We'll go back to that next time, the faith. Let's go on to, in reviewing, I'll read this section, and we'll go over this section, which is more or less what Jeffrey Hopkins had said, perhaps some more things. Shame, motsat shepa in Tibetan, and embarrassment, telyoba. You notice those who are taking Tibetan class, karatata dembutela tel. It's called telyo, not krelyo, right? As we do in Tibetan. Telyoba or telyo. So regarding shame, the Abhidhamma Samachaya says, what is shame? It is an avoidance of misdeeds on account of oneself, that is, taking oneself as the reason. It has the function of acting as a support for effective restraint from misconduct. As has been said above, shame is an avoidance of misdeeds on account of oneself. So these two mental factors, shame and embarrassment, use different reasons for avoiding non-virtue. The other one, embarrassment, takes others as the reason. What is embarrassment? It is an avoidance of misdeeds on account of others. It has the function of just that is, acting as a support for effective restraint from misconduct. As has been said above, shame is an avoidance of misconduct. Oh, she's got it wrong here. Embarrassment is an avoidance of misconduct on account of others, right? Shame we had above. Okay, so now here's the discussion of the two, shame and embarrassment. What's the difference between shame and embarrassment? Although both of them are similar in terms of avoiding misconduct. So when these mental factors are present, they cause one to shun non-virtuous action. Like sometimes we say, I won't do that, I'd be ashamed to do that. My gurus would be disappointed. It's a shameful thing to do. Or say, I would be embarrassed to do that because others would feel, I had let them down, my gurus, the Buddhas. If you think of your guru on the crown of your head, that can help you to develop that mental factor of embarrassment. Embarrassment, I don't know, doesn't quite, sometimes it's used for that.
Michael uses shame and consideration.
Okay, good for her, okay. What's the difference between shame and embarrassment? Although both of them are similar in terms of avoiding misconduct, shame is such that when one is about to engage in misconduct, one avoids it thinking, this is not something I should do. It might be because, for instance, one thinks, I shouldn't do this because I will create negative karma. I should not do this because my reputation will go down. Has to do basically taking oneself as a reason. You might think that it's hard to imagine that would be a virtuous mental factor. If you took, say, that you should avoid something because your reputation would be damaged. What do you think? Would that still be a virtuous mental factor? Because it's causing you to avoid some particular negative action?
Get you a good result.
Could be a mix. A mix.
Could be a mix.
If you're practicing morality, though, or trying to practice morality or ethics.
If you're practicing or trying to practice, is
Well,
good, right?
okay, if you're practicing morality or ethics and you do something that isn't one of them, or the opposite or something like that, that's where I can see embarrassment would come in, or shame and embarrassment.
Mhm. That you would feel shame, and then you would either stop or curtail or
Something,
reevaluate
yeah,
or
yeah.
prevent yourself from
Yeah,
doing something, right?
right.
Mhm.
It has a function of vigilance.
Yeah, is that what it says?
It's almost like a wise selfishness.
A wise selfishness.
Down
Mhm.
on the sense. You don't want to hurt yourself. You're doing a certain action.
Mhm. So in taking oneself as a reason, does it have to be a higher reason, or can it be kind of selfish, like that my reputation will be diminished?
Well,
I think
it's
it's
the
thinking
virtue.
about suffering, the future suffering that you would have.
So what if I'm just thinking, if I do this, my reputation will go down and people won't give me offerings anymore?
Yeah. So that's not as good
That's
as
not
if
as
it were.
It's not as good, but is that still a case of shame? Is that still a virtuous mental factor?
I think that's
Well,
not
a virtuous,
No.
a virtuous mental factor is relative.
But say the reason for avoiding is some kind of
Attachment.
attachment.
So it's
Wait a
hard
minute.
to think of a virtue being a virtue unless it's something that brings joy. So I think if you can, and it's hard for me to think of shame as being something that brings joy. So
Oh, so you think all virtues, the virtuous mental factors, all have to be joyous?
yes, that's according to the Abhidharma Kosha, which defines virtue as that.
Abhidharma Kosha defines virtue as joy?
The Abhidharma Kosha defines virtue as an action which brings happiness when it's being enacted, and also brings the ultimate result, that freedom from samsara.
I don't think that it says that, actually. We can check. Certainly, virtuous state of mind doesn't have to be one that creates happiness or joy right now. It creates the karma to experience happy results in the future, and creates the karma to have the ultimate, if you dedicate it, can have the karma to liberate you from samsara. But virtuous state of mind, I'm not sure. I'll have to check what quotation you're quoting there, if that's actually what Abhidharma Kosha actually says. But let's continue here with this just discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I was just wondering what the answer to that was. What you thought. I mean, is
What?
that one thinking I'm not going to do this because what do people think of me or my offerings? You know, with that motivation.
Well, let's think about it for a couple. We'll have another class on Thursday. Okay, we'll see. Um,
Well, if your reasoning is because you want to get money or whatever, is that shame?
No, that's
Any longer? I mean, are you feeling shame?
Here, it says, what is shame? It is an avoidance of misdeeds on account of oneself. Say, for instance, one avoids killing. Say you're with a bunch of, say you're with Venerable and the Chinese benefactors, and you might like to have clam chowder or something like that. And you avoid putting the clams in the boiling water. Instead, you liberate them because you figure that the Chinese people will give you offerings. You avoid non-virtue, right? Is that shame? Yeah, let's check.
Because it's based on offerings, and you just can't do that. It's virtuous.
Okay,
You
okay.
just can't.
Let's check. So,
The 8 whirling dharmas, and you just don't do that.
although both of them are similar in terms of avoiding misconduct, shame is such that when one is about to engage in misconduct, one avoids it, thinking, this is not something I should do. In the case of embarrassment, when one comes close to engaging in misconduct, one avoids it on account of others, thinking, if others were to despise me as a result of my engaging in misconduct, this would not be fitting. So there's a little bit. One avoids misconduct due to concern about displeasure of one's gurus or teachers, the principal object causing this avoidance. This would be embarrassment, right? The function is specified as acting as a support for effective restraint from misconduct, because shame and embarrassment are definitely necessary for restraining misconduct of the three, body, speech, and mind. If shame and embarrassment are absent, one will be unable to restrain oneself from any misconduct whatsoever, for without fear about the fruition from one's own side, without fear of the karmic consequences, and lacking concern about displeasure of one's gurus, teachers, and so forth, there will be no way to cease misconduct. So if you think about it, well, that was fast, 15 minutes.
I don't know that.
15 minutes went down to 3 minutes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I don't know.
Okay. So, if you think about it, maybe avoiding, say for instance, we avoid killing because we're with Venerable Sophia and she's very virtuous and liberating animals. Maybe that's not shame or embarrassment, because shame and embarrassment are virtuous mental factors, and they're based on some kind of higher reasons, such as the understanding of the law of cause and effect. Even if it's an ego, because virtue doesn't have to be without a sense of ego, right? Virtuous activities. Remember when we talk about virtue, most of the virtues that we create now are what are called contaminated virtues, right? No, they're contaminated virtues, because they're contaminated because we still grasp the true existence. I am going to make this real offering because I want to experience real happiness, or I want to attain real enlightenment, or whatever. The virtue that we create now is called contaminated virtue. So within that realm, you can have embarrassment and shame. But I think going beyond that, if you're thinking conniving, like with the eight, like Oma's qualm, if you're thinking with respect to 8 worldly dharmas, I better not do this because I better not engage in this negativity because my benefactors won't approve or something like that, and they won't give me something. That's not the meaning. That wouldn't be a virtuous state of mind.
Would be mixed.
You think it'd be mixed? You think you'd create some virtue by that?
No.
If you
That'd be
avoid
a
killing,
contaminated virtue.
and you're doing it because you are doing it from great reasons of pride, then I can see that there would be virtue in avoiding the killing and non-virtue in aggrandizing your ego.
Uh-huh. Interesting. Okay, so something to think about for next time. Let's end here without shame or embarrassment. We've worked hard, and let's do a dedication again. So see if you can let go of your attention to the senses, to your body. If you take the mind itself as the object for a few moments, that can, by familiarity, that can begin to calm the mind very quickly. And within a state of faith in the law of cause and effect, it may be partially a faith of conviction, maybe a certain kind of, not total conviction. Still have some doubt about that, because doubt is something that comes before faith. But due to thinking that I've created some virtuous karma that will have some karmic result, this energy will have some result in cyclic existence, which should have some beneficial, happy result as its virtuous karma, because we're motivated with virtue. May this ripen in such a way that it does not, first of all, that it doesn't cause me to create pride in whatever qualities arise in the future. If I have resources, may I not be avaricious and miserly with them. If I have high status, may I not develop pride and so forth. But in whatever way this karma ripens, may that situation be such that it is enhancing of my spiritual practice. Every time this karma ripens, may it continue to enhance my spiritual practice up to and including my achievement of enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings. And seal that dedication, that conventional dedication of the varieties within the sphere of the emptiness of the three spheres. The sphere, first of all, of the actions that we've created. Where are the actions? What are they? They're merely labeled, the karma that we've created today. You can't find them in any particular spot or location. The actions are labeled to a sequence of events, a motivation, the carrying out of that action, the objects dedicated to the continued development of our spiritual practice up to and including enlightenment. None of the individual states also can be found upon analysis. They're merely imputed, designated. And the act of dedication itself is a name that we give to this activity of trying to join the virtues with the results. Also unfindable upon analysis, merely existing as a concept, but having karmic efficacy in so doing, in aspiring that these roots ripen in that way. There is no self who is dedicating, no truly existent self. There's no karma, there's no goal, ultimately. There's no action of dedication, ultimately.